Good evening, everyone. Hopefully, you're having a wonderful day so far. I got a good one for you today. So, I was on the YouTubes earlier on, and I noticed that Pierre Poilievre did a interview with the Daily Wire and Jordan Peterson. So, I thought we'd get into it. Since it looks like Pierre Poilievre's going a different way with his interviews, going more non-mainstream media rather than the mainstream media ways of getting himself out there. So first off, if you liked the video, please like and subscribe. And with no further ado, let's get into it.
Been almost 2.5 years since we sat down to talk the time before. So I guess the first thing I'd like to know is, what have you been doing during that time? I'd like to hear about your day-to-day schedule and your week-to-week schedule. Like, lay out your job.
Basically, we have two parts to my professional life. It's very bifurcated. There's the Parliament Hill side, which is early morning meeting with my leadership team, House Leader, Deputy Leader, Whip, etc., to plan out the day, the battle plan for our parliamentary committees, question period, etc. That is punctuated by one weekly caucus meeting, and just the daily prosecution of the government, which is the quintessential role of an opposition leader. And then the other part to my life is touring. I asked my assistant today how many events we had done over the last year, and he said it was exactly 600. I mean, a few weeks ago it was 570 something. So we've done 600 events, and those are like tours at mills, mines, factories, farms, high-tech facilities. And we tour in, see how the place operates. Then I give a short speech, do a question and answer, and then I just mull about and shake hands with the workers for 25 minutes to an hour. And then I go on to the next stop and do it all over again. And we did that in 9 provinces and 2 territories this year. And so that's a summary of my workload and work plan to do my job.
And you said 600.
So wow, 600 pretty much interviews and meeting people and mulling about 600 times in a year. Holy moly, imagine how much work that would be. And that's on top of the day-to-day being in Parliament, being in question period, have to get ready for question period, and then doing interviews about Parliament. Holy. Can you imagine the work initiative you need to do that?
Events, you made allusion when we were driving over here that the weekends are particularly packed, that you'll do like 10 events on Saturday or Sunday.
Right.
And so what a typical event, what do you enjoy about the events? Why are they useful, and what do you learn?
Well, first of all, you get a practical insight into how the country actually works. Mm-hmm. Like who makes the widgets? How do those get made? How does our supply chain come together? What skill sets do these incredible workers have? What background qualified them to be a licensed welder, or to run a CNC machine, or to be the CEO of a 300-person company that supplies parts into the American economy? And that practical insight, I think, is important if you want to lead a government and a national economy. So you learn a lot. Then I get to hear the stories of the people who work in these places and get their feedback on what they want, what their dreams and aspirations are.
Yeah, I want to turn to that in some detail. Let me ask you about the parliamentary side too, because I think it'd be useful for people to know.
Yeah, I think after going to 600 places in a whole year, you'd get to see a lot of how Canada works and how different Canadians live their lives. Now, that reminds me of an interview that Jagmeet Singh did with I think it was the CBC, where he was grilling Pierre Poilievre about not going up to northern Quebec enough. And after listening to this, and it's like, yeah, now we know why Jagmeet Singh was able to go up to like northern Quebec 5 times, while Pierre Poilievre was only able to go up 3 times, I believe. Pierre Poilievre is going to 10 functions every weekend. Well, every Saturday. So I think we should probably remember this the next time any of the opposition grills Pierre Poilievre about not working hard enough for Canadians.
How you prepare for what you do in Parliament, it isn't obvious to me that people exactly understand the business of being in opposition, at a really practical level.
Right.
What do you see as your major function? I know you're there to push back against the government and to question and criticize, but it isn't obvious how you go about preparing for that, or how you decide what issues you're going to focus on, and how you distribute the responsibilities among your caucus and your broader team.
So, there's a lot of discretion. You make up your mind when you wake up in the morning. You read the news. You see, I have a team that gives me a full briefing of all the published news from the mainstream media, all the news from the independent and ethnic media, all a download of the entire social media landscape. And then I respond to that by saying, well, I think these are we have roughly 25 questions we can ask. And I'll say, well, I want 10 on inflation, and 3 on violent crime, and 4 on whatever the subject happens to be in the day. And I want this committee to focus on this today, and that committee to focus on that today. And then our teams go out and we do it. And I've been very blessed because my caucus is extremely talented and they don't need a lot of direction. But we've been acting in unison, and I think that's why our message is pumping out so clearly to people. It's not a cacophony of sound, it's a clear drumbeat. And that's why people are hearing and appreciating our message.
So you feel that your party is well organized at the moment?
Extremely well organized.
Okay, so what's your evidence for that?
Well, by every measure, by every statistical measure, we're stronger than any political party has been in, well, maybe in my lifetime, objectively speaking. Memberships, fundraising, poll numbers.
Right, so people are positive in consequence of that. So it's a lot easier to lead an organization when it's successful.
That's
obviously,
right.
People are much more enthusiastic.
Yes.
Why do you think you're in that position? What's going on that's setting the stage for that? And I don't just mean the failures on the Trudeau side. I mean, what do you think you guys are doing right?
Well, we have a clearer mission statement, and people know exactly why we're in this. Whenever someone asks me, if they say, I'm thinking of running for parliament or for mayor or some other political position, what's your advice? Well, I said, well, before I get to the advice, I have a very simple question. Why do you want this job? Mm-hmm. And it might seem like a simplistic question, but it's actually the most important question in life. Why? Why are you doing what you're doing? And our answer to that is to bring back the Canadian promise that anyone who works hard gets a great paycheck and a pension that buys them good food and a nice home and a safe neighborhood, that anyone from anywhere can do anything, and that people are in charge of their own lives. That's effectively what we want to deliver. So every day when I'm in Parliament...
So that's a very local vision in a sense, right? It doesn't have the grandiosity of an international utopian vision, for example.
Well, maybe
it's very down to earth.
I think people are sick and tired of grandiosity. In fact, I think there's something...
So I just want to say something before we continue on, which I like how they are touching on what Pierre Poilievre does before question period, before he goes out to Parliament, because pretty much no Canadian that I know really knows that. I mean, there's some YouTube channels like Northern Perspective is actually the only one I've seen that tells their audience, like, hey, yeah, we've talked to some MPs and they say Pierre Poilievre does this and this and this and this right before question period to prepare for it. And so questioning Pierre Poilievre on uh, what it takes to actually be at his level in Parliament is quite eye-opening. And a lot of this stuff, like, I didn't even know that they do.
Thing grand about a family that can can go on a nice road trip and share stories and build lasting memories that the kids will remember when they're 85 years old.
Despite
I think that's
producing all that nasty carbon dioxide.
that's right. I think those things are grand. And I think with the problem we've had in this country and in all of the countries that have been afflicted by this horrendous utopian wokeism is that it's been focused on the grandiosity of the leadership of the egotistical personalities on top, and not the things that are grand and great about the common people. And that is another reason why I think we're doing very well. People are saying finally there's someone who's focused on letting me take back control of my own life and create a great future for my family. So that is, to answer your question, one of the reasons why we've had such incredible success over the last 2 years.
In the beginning.
Well, yeah, if you focus on the middle class, and I don't really like using this word, but the smaller people, the more local people, and rather than pandering to the more affluent and richer class in any country, will probably work a lot better. Politics is a numbers game, and especially when the opposition is like this incompetent, it's almost impossible to lose. Though, I mean, we've seen O'Toole, and he was able to lose in the pandemic. All right, let's skip forward a bit.
Okay, so there's a lot of distrust, generally speaking, in relationship to, I would say, establishment organizations and political elites all across the West. A lot of that well-earned. Why should Canadians believe that the vision that you just laid out is something that you hold personally dear and not merely what would you say, a set of carefully calculated campaign slogans?
Well, I look back at everything I've done for my
that's a question you ain't gonna get on the CBC. Nope.
entire political career to the time I was a teenager. You know, some people even dug up my old university essays, and I've been saying precisely the same thing the entire time. You know, when I was 20, I wrote an essay as Prime Minister I would, and the title was Building Canada on Freedom. And the entire piece was about making the government small and maximizing personal freedom. So that's basically what I'm doing now.
So you have consistency
well, there were
going
things,
for you.
when I launched my leadership race, I literally had the same language in my leadership launch speech that I had put in that essay 22 or 23 years earlier. And when I was part of the Harper government, we basically fought for and did the same things then that I'm proposing to do now. So as much as you can be assured of anything any political leader says, I've got evidence to back it up.
Okay, so one of the things that's been very distressing to observe.
What I get from that, I think, is he's sort of saying that the conservative government that's going to come in is going to be, their goals are going to be quite similar to what the Harper government was. Of course, it's going to be different because of a different leader, but their ultimate goal is going to be the same thing. That's what I kind of get from that.
I would say, and I'm going to use the UK as an example. I mean, the UK had 14 straight years of conservative government.
Yeah.
And, you know, as far as I'm concerned, thank God for that, because it could have been Labour. But having said that, they fell 100% prey to the blandishments of the net zero types and brought forward really a catastrophic energy policy. And the UK is suffering dreadfully for that. And their immigration policy, I mean, Keir Starmer apologized for it, which was something remarkable to behold, and so did Kemi Badenoch, who now runs the Conservatives in the UK. Now, the reason I'm bringing them up as an example is because, well, they were a Conservative government, and they certainly didn't govern by anything approximating Conservative principles. And so how do you feel about the probability that if the Conservatives in Canada take power, that they'll be enticed into this global utopian delusion that seems to have enveloped so many leaders, kind of regardless of their political stripe. What do you think, if anything, can inoculate you or has inoculated you against that?
I know better.
Well, elaborate. What do you mean?
I'm not going to do that. And it will be hard because the temptation will be, this is the mistake that conservative parties around the world have made countless times. They think, well, anybody who's got a conservative mindset is already voting for me, so I can go off and chase the ideas of my political opponents, and then everyone will love me because I'll have the conservatives due to the fact that I have the name conservative. And then I'll have all these other people because I've embraced their contrary direction. And in the short term, it works because you manage to have all of these people under, and all of the different political ideologies captured in one tent. But the problem happens when the policies are a disaster. And then people wake up and go, oh my God, my taxes are now up, the inflation is out of control, the deficit is spiraling, there's crime on the streets. So does the temptation exist to try and take on the political policies of the socialists in the short term? Sure, but it's one that I will fiercely resist because I know that by the fourth year of my mandate, people would be enraged because their lives would be even worse. So it will be tough, though. Like, it's going to be a trade-off.
See the temptation. I mean,
And that's what Andrew Scheer failed to realize when he was leader. When he ran, he pretty much was like, okay, well, I'm running on the conservatives. I'm conservatives, so I got all the conservatives, and I got the Western provinces. So I need Quebec, I need Ontario, I need this and the. So I'm going to pander to them as well. And he tried that and failed epically. Now, to his point that, Trudeau wasn't doing that bad and things hadn't gotten, well, that was the beginning. I mean, Canadians were still a tiny bit disillusioned with Trudeau at that point, and we hadn't gotten into the bad era of the pandemic yet, but that was the mistake of Andrew Scheer, is exactly what Jordan Peterson and Pierre Poilievre said right there.
Yeah. I think many leaders fall prey to the temptation to shine on the international stage, right? I mean, I can't remember who it was in the UK. I believe it was the previous Labour Party leader who said that decisions in Westminster were essentially irrelevant because all the important things were happening internationally, right? And so if people are involved in status climbing and they hit the national pinnacle, there's the international world to, what would you say, to dominate or to impress. And I think that the power of that temptation or even of that peer pressure can't be underestimated. So, okay, so now you've been, these 600 events that you've gone to, so let's say that's something approximating 1,000 to 1,200 since we last talked. You spent a lot of time speaking to, and I presume listening to ordinary Canadians. I heard you make a speech in the House of Commons that went viral in the last couple of weeks, and you spoke very persuasively on behalf of working class Canadians. And so tell us what you've learned, what you've heard over the last couple of years, and how that's shaped you and changed you, let's say, as you've moved from, as you shifted your position up the political hierarchy and are poised really likely to take the reins in Canada at some point in the next year. You've listened to all these people. And so what have you learned? And what has it made you convinced of, let's say?
Well, first of all, there's the bad news and the good news. The bad news is that people feel like they've done absolutely everything right and their lives are trapped. Young people say, look, okay, I went through, I got an education, I work nonstop, and I have made the calculation that there is no mathematical path for me to own a house. It's just not possible. In Toronto here, for example, if you take the average income and the average house price it would take you 29 years to save up for a down payment. So, if you're
For a down payment.
For a down payment, not to pay it off, forget paying it off. And so if you're a young woman who's got a biological clock, obviously, well, do the math. You start off at, let's say you're 25. Well, you're going to be in your 50s before you can afford the average house. So how are you ever going to have kids?
And that's about the time when people think about downsizing from their house.
That's what they used to think about downsizing. And, they usually had their house paid off back by the time they were in their early 50s. So just to show how dreadfully things have worsened, that's the picture of the youth. Then there's the kind of middle-aged people who do have kids already, and they're terrified of the dangers in the streets. Our streets are just being overtaken by drugs and gangsterism, and other dangers, and they want safety again.
Yeah, just listen to any story in the GTA area about car thefts and break-ins to their homes. I mean, you saw in Toronto the chief of police there just tell people to, leave their key fobs right at the door, so when the criminals come and break down your door, they can just get their keys right away and won't put you in danger. That's how bad Toronto is.
And then you have business owners that are saying there's just no way to continue to compete in Canada. We have to look at moving, and that means the next 200 jobs we create is going to be in Ohio or Florida or some other place than Canada. That's the kind of overview that I get. The good news, though, is that people do now have some hope. They think that things can be turned around, and they have clearly and correctly diagnosed the problem, which is entirely political. There is no physical, geographic reason why Canada should struggle to supply people with great opportunities of home ownership and family formation. In fact, we should be the richest country in the world. And people increasingly know that, and they know that if we make the right, albeit difficult, political decisions, that they will once again be able to do as their parents did, which is to say, get a house, start a family, live in a safe neighborhood, raise their kids with good traditional values. That's another thing I'm finding, is that a lot of people are really getting back to those values that we were told were unfashionable. They want, young people today, they want to have families.
Well, there's been a real conservative swing, especially among young men. Well, no wonder, because they've been demonized for 30 straight years for every aspect of their masculinity, from their play preferences to their proclivity to destroy the planet with their ambition. And so there's definitely an opportunity there. And clearly your political party and you are capitalizing on that you have the support from young people increasingly right across Canada.
We are winning among youth. In fact, the youth were the first to come on board with me. My rallies were overwhelmingly populated with youth, which is not normal for conservatives.
Right.
And the reason is because in your youth, of course, you as you write it, young people want to have the adventure of their lives. They want to go into the wilderness and earn a living and bring it home and
do
raise
something
kids
responsible
and have a purpose that's bigger than just short-termism. And I think, 20 years ago, the socialists would go to university campuses and say, vote for us and we'll let you be a kid forever. We'll give you free stuff, and you'll never have to get a job. And that was very temporarily popular across the Western world. But then young people woke up and found out this was not a utopia, it was a total dystopia, and that all the things that they really valued and wanted for their lives were impossible when they were being borne down upon by this massive state. They've learned that help is the sunny side of control. And so now young people I love this. This is great news. Our young people are saying, I want to start a business. I want to invent something. I want to create things. I want to become a tradesman. And then when I get good enough at that, I want to hire 5 other tradesmen. And by the time I retire, I want to have 300 employees. And then I want to give that company to my kids. These are the stories that I hear when I go out and about in Canada. And the great news is we can have all those things. That's the optimistic message that I have for people. But we've got a limitless supply of.
From what I experienced for being a college student when Trudeau first came in, is what the issue the Conservative Party had was they weren't promoting themselves towards the youth. They were promoting themselves towards people who only knew politics and the older generations. Now, that's something the liberals and I guess the socialists really took advantage of, is they knew what the young people were struggling with. So they knew how to put the rose-colored glasses on us all. They told us, oh, well, we'll legalize weed. And yeah, sure, they legalized it, but it's still incredibly hard to get. That's not my thing, but the bigger things is Justin Trudeau came out before he was prime minister, and he said that, he'd erase all the student loan debt. And by the time I got out of college, like, student loan debt was big. It was a big thing, so that made him very ideal. And yeah, he said a lot about, like, that Stephen Harper was too old to know what the young people need, stuff like, and really, really intrigued us to the illusion that the Liberals could do all of these utopian things. And as young people, if you're not, well, young people back then, we didn't have YouTube, we didn't have a lot of things like we do now, so we were very, very misinformed on fiscal policy and economics and stuff like that. And I think that's a big reason why, as well, young people, like young people just out of college, like Gen Zers, are turning towards the Conservative Party, is because we have YouTube now. These people know what economic policy are. They're more integrated with our political system. They're more aware. And that's also why they're more conservative, because they know what's going on. And I think liberals really, really grasp at the unaware voter.
Resources here. We're like a cornucopia. You know, the third biggest supply of oil, fifth biggest supply of natural gas, biggest supply of uranium, fifth biggest supply of lithium. We've got not one, not two, not three, but 4 coasts to tidewater.
Right.
We live next to the biggest military and economic superpower the world has ever seen. We have a highly educated population and the best system of government in the history of the world, the parliamentary system. Not the best government, but the best system of government. So all these massive advantages, we just need to unleash that potential.
Right. So the unhappiness that you're seeing among young people seems to me to be a consequence of the mismatch between the opportunity they see right in front of them and their frustration at the fact that that opportunity can't be capitalized on, even if they're contributing their fair share.
And they're definitely doing their part. Like, they really are. You know, it's always been a habit of older people to say, you know, the youth these days. When I look at the young people today, all they do is work. I am astonished when I meet young university students how much they work outside of their studies just to scrape by. How many hours of labor they do as waitresses or in another service job so that they can pay their bills. Way more than when I was a student, 25 years ago.
When I was a kid in Alberta, I could work in the summer, and I didn't work on the rig, so I didn't have one of the high-paying jobs. Right. I had a more, what would you say, a job that was secondarily associated with the resource economy. I could make enough money in the summer, in 2 months, 4 months, to pay for the tuition and my entire year's rent.
Of course.
Right.
And now these kids are working 20, 30 hours a week in addition to a full course load. And they look exhausted. When I meet young people today, they are exhausted. They have bags under their eyes, and all they do is work. And the worst part about it is not that they're working all the time. It's that they don't see a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, and that's exactly the case too. Is when I was first off in college, I only had to work during the summers. And I didn't work on the rigs or anything, but I did work in the trades and worked during the summers to earn enough money to kind of keep me alive, and then use the student loans as my to pay for schooling. So all that summer income went towards food and stuff and accommodations. So I couldn't imagine being a student nowadays where school is probably twice as much as when I went in there, and everything like food and all that is twice as much, and you don't get paid the same amount. So you have to go to school, and then you have to do your homework after school, and then you have to work on top of that. I couldn't imagine doing that nowadays. That would just be horrible. But I think that's all we're going to go through right now. I'll leave a link to the full video down below because it's already been like 37 minutes. So definitely watch the whole interview. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe. I'm really hoping for about 700 subscribers by the end of January. And other than that, have a good day.